The airport was a whirlwind of noise and movement, people rushing past, flight announcements echoing through the terminal, and the ever-present hum of conversations blending into a chaotic symphony. Anna Carter clutched her worn-out duffel bag tighter, her other hand gripping Lily's small fingers. The little girl, barely 5 years old, yawned as she stumbled slightly, her pink backpack hanging loosely off her shoulders. "Mommy, I'm tired," Lily murmured, rubbing her eyes. Anna glanced at her phone. 10:47 p.m. Their flight to Los Angeles was boarding in less than 30 minutes. Her pulse quickened as she adjusted the strap of her bag, exhaustion weighing down on her after working back-to-back shifts at the diner. Every muscle in her body ached, and the relentless stress pressing on her chest made it hard to breathe. "I know, sweetheart. We're almost there," she reassured, though she wasn't sure if she was comforting her daughter or herself. Lily nodded, too tired to argue. Anna wished she could scoop her up and carry her, but her arms were already numb from hauling their belongings. The weight of the duffel was nothing compared to the crushing reality of why they were here. Running. Not from a person, but from the wreckage of a life that had fallen apart too many times. The eviction notice had come that morning, an official end to the last thread of stability she had in Chicago. Kate had offered her and Lily a place to stay in Los Angeles, and though Anna hated the idea of moving across the country with nothing but 2 bags and a handful of savings, she had no choice. They reached the gate just as the final boarding announcement echoed overhead. The line was moving quickly, and Anna dug into her jacket pocket for their tickets, her hands trembling from exhaustion. The gate agent barely glanced at them before scanning the passes and motioning them through. As they stepped onto the plane, the cool, air-conditioned cabin was a welcome contrast to the stuffy airport. Lily clutched Anna's hand, blinking sleepily as they shuffled down the narrow aisle. She glanced at the seat number on her ticket, row 4. Anna frowned. That didn't seem right. She was sure their seats were in the back of the plane, yet here she was, standing in the plush interior of first class. The seats were spacious, upholstered in rich leather, with wide armrests and ample legroom. It was nothing like the cramped rows of economy where she was certain they were supposed to be. "Excuse me," she mumbled, shifting her bag and trying to move past a man sitting in the aisle seat of row 4. Before she could take another step, a deep, smooth voice interrupted her. "You're in the right place." Anna turned, startled. The man in the aisle seat was watching her with calm, piercing blue eyes. He was dressed in a tailored suit, effortlessly composed, his salt and pepper hair neatly styled. The soft lighting of the cabin highlighted the sharp angles of his face, making him look both polished and intimidating. I think there's been a mistake," she stammered. "No mistake," he replied, offering a small, almost knowing smile. Confused, Anna hesitated, her mind too foggy from exhaustion to fully process what was happening. The flight attendant appeared beside them, a tray of pre-flight champagne in hand, her gaze flickering between Anna's worn hoodie and the man's expensive suit. "These passengers are with me," the man said smoothly, handing the flight attendant a business card. Anna's stomach twisted. Something wasn't right. Anna's grip on Lily's hand tightened as she tried to make sense of the man's words. "These passengers are with me?" That couldn't be right. She didn't know him. She didn't know anyone who could afford a seat in first class, let alone one who would claim her and her daughter as guests. I don't understand," she murmured, shifting uneasily. The flight attendant's demeanor instantly changed after reading the business card. Her stiff posture relaxed, and her previously scrutinizing gaze softened into something almost apologetic. "Of course, Mr. Whitmore," she said with a polite nod before turning to Anna. "Please make yourselves comfortable. Let me know if you need anything." Anna's pulse pounded in her ears. Mr. Whitmore. The name was vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place where she had heard it before. The man, David Whitmore, gave her another calm, unreadable look before shifting slightly to allow her and Lily to sit down. Lily, unaware of the tension humming in the air, climbed into the middle seat and curled up immediately, hugging her backpack. She barely lasted a few seconds before her breathing evened out, deep in sleep. Anna, however, remained stiff, gripping the armrest as her exhausted brain tried to catch up with what was happening. "I can't accept this," she whispered, leaning slightly toward David. "We're in economy. I don't know what's going on, but we can move." David exhaled lightly, as if he had been expecting her protest. "The seats are paid for either way," he said. "And your daughter is already asleep. Let her rest." Anna swallowed, her throat dry. Every instinct in her told her to refuse, to get up, to move to her real seat. But she couldn't ignore the truth. Lily needed this rest. They both did. Still, she shook her head. "Why are you doing this?" David didn't answer immediately. He glanced down at Lily, the corners of his eyes softening ever so slightly. Then he looked back at Anna, his expression composed but sincere. "Let's just say someone once helped me when I needed it," he said, "and I believe in paying it forward." Anna studied him warily. His voice carried no arrogance, no expectation of gratitude, just a quiet conviction, as if he had already made up his mind and wouldn't take no for an answer. A lump formed in her throat. People don't help others for nothing. At least that had been her experience. There was always an angle, always a price. But looking at Lily, peaceful for the first time in what felt like days, Anna let out a slow, shaky breath. Maybe, just this once, she could set aside her suspicions. "Thank you," she murmured, barely audible. David nodded, seemingly satisfied with her reluctant acceptance. "Get some rest," he said, reaching for the in-flight documents in the pocket in front of him. "It's a long flight." Anna hesitated for another moment before finally leaning back into the plush seat. The soft leather embraced her, and despite her best efforts to stay alert, the exhaustion of the past few days crashed down on her like a wave. As the plane began taxiing down the runway, her last thought before drifting into uneasy sleep was that something about David Whitmore seemed familiar, like a face she had seen before but couldn't quite place. What she didn't know was that, at that very moment, David was glancing at her from the corner of his eye, frowning slightly, as if he too was trying to recall where he had seen her before. And neither of them knew yet that this unexpected flight would change both their lives forever. The hum of the aircraft and the dimmed cabin lights created an almost dreamlike stillness. Anna stirred slightly, feeling the weight of exhaustion pressing down on her body. For the first time in days, she had managed to sleep without waking in a panic. She blinked groggily, momentarily disoriented, before remembering where she was. First class, sitting beside a man she barely knew. She turned her head slightly. Lily was still curled up beside her, her tiny hands gripping the fabric of Anna's worn hoodie, her breaths slow and steady. Anna let out a soft sigh of relief before shifting her gaze toward David Whitmore. He was awake, sitting upright with his laptop open, his fingers moving fluidly across the keyboard. The dim blue glow illuminated his features, casting sharp shadows along his jawline. She hesitated before speaking, still unsure of how to handle this unexpected generosity. "You don't sleep?" she asked softly, her voice still rough from sleep. David didn't immediately look up. "Not often," he admitted before finally meeting her gaze. "I'm used to working through flights." Anna studied him, noting the subtle signs of exhaustion on his face, dark circles under his eyes, the faint tension in his posture. He was composed, controlled, but there was something beneath the surface, something guarded. "Must be nice," she murmured, leaning her head back against the seat. "Having work important enough to keep you awake?" David arched an eyebrow. "You think work is what keeps me awake?" Anna frowned slightly, sensing there was more to his words. But before she could press further, the flight attendant returned, balancing a tray. "Would you like something to eat, Ms. Carter?" she asked, her tone noticeably more polite than it had been when Anna first boarded the plane. Anna hesitated. She wasn't used to being catered to, and despite the gnawing hunger in her stomach, she felt awkward accepting anything. "She'll have the omelet," David said smoothly, glancing at the menu before turning to the flight attendant. "And bring some extra fruit for her daughter when she wakes up." Anna shot him a look. "I can order for myself." David smirked slightly, leaning back in his seat. "I know, but I saw you hesitate and I figured I'd save you the trouble." Anna pressed her lips together but didn't argue. She wasn't in the mood for an empty stomach battle of wills. As the flight attendant placed the meal before her, she muttered a quiet, "Thanks," and picked up her fork. David returned to his laptop, but after a few moments of silence, he spoke again. "You never answered my question," he said, glancing at her. Anna blinked, mid-bite. "Which one?" He tilted his head slightly. "Why are you heading to Los Angeles?" She hesitated, feeling the weight of the answer press against her chest. It wasn't something she shared freely, mostly because she wasn't proud of it. "Fresh start," she finally said, her voice carefully neutral. David nodded as if he understood, but there was something in his gaze that suggested he wasn't satisfied with the vague response. And Anna had the distinct feeling that this man was very good at uncovering the truth. Anna focused on her food, deliberately avoiding David's gaze. She could feel his curiosity lingering, but she wasn't ready to offer more than what she had already said. David didn't press, though. Instead, he leaned back in his seat, closing his laptop with a quiet click. "Los Angeles is a good place for fresh starts," he said, almost as if he was speaking from experience. Anna swallowed a bite of omelet and glanced at him. "You say that like you know." David studied her for a moment before responding. "I do." His voice was calm, steady, but there was something distant in the way he said it, like a memory he wasn't eager to revisit. Anna wanted to ask, but before she could, Lily stirred beside her, letting out a soft yawn. She blinked sleepily, then stretched her arms before looking around. When her gaze landed on the tray of fruit beside her, her eyes lit up. "Mommy, look!" she whispered excitedly, pointing at the perfectly sliced strawberries and grapes. "Fancy food," Anna chuckled, brushing a hand over Lily's curls. "It is pretty fancy, huh?" Lily picked up a grape and popped it into her mouth, chewing happily. She barely seemed to notice the unfamiliar surroundings anymore, too preoccupied with her unexpected treat. David watched the interaction with quiet amusement. "I take it she's never flown first class before." Anna scoffed lightly. "She's never flown at all before today." David's eyebrows lifted slightly. "And you?" Anna hesitated, then shook her head. "Not since I was a kid." My mom took me on a plane once when I was little. I don't remember much about it. David nodded thoughtfully, but didn't pry further. Instead, he shifted the topic. So, where in Los Angeles are you headed? Anna hesitated again. There was nothing particularly secret about it, but something about this man's steady, assessing gaze made her feel exposed. My sister lives in Silver Lake, she said finally. She's letting us stay with her for a while. David nodded as if he had expected that answer. Silver Lake's nice. A little quieter than downtown. Good place for a kid. Anna let out a breath, leaning back against her seat. That's the hope. For a few moments, silence settled between them, interrupted only by the occasional murmur of other passengers and the low hum of the engines. Then David spoke again, his tone thoughtful. You know, it's funny, he mused, tapping his fingers against the armrest. I feel like I've seen you somewhere before. Anna's pulse skipped slightly. There it was again, that flicker of recognition she had sensed from him earlier. She forced a small, casual shrug. I doubt it. David tilted his head slightly, his eyes narrowing just a fraction as if he were trying to place her. But before he could say anything else, the flight attendant returned, interrupting the moment. Mr. Whitmore, would you like your usual? David blinked, his attention shifting. Yes, please. Anna released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She didn't know why, but something about David Whitmore recognizing her unsettled her, and she had the strange, nagging feeling that this wasn't the last time he would try to figure out who she was. The plane touched down smoothly at Los Angeles International Airport, the sudden jolt of the landing gear pulling Anna from her restless thoughts. She exhaled a slow breath, adjusting her grip on Lily's tiny hand as the cabin buzzed with the usual post-flight commotion. Seatbelts unbuckling, overhead bins creaking open, and murmurs of passengers eager to disembark. Lily stretched beside her, rubbing her sleepy eyes with the back of her hand. Are we in California now? She asked, her voice thick with drowsiness. Anna forced a small smile. Yeah, sweetheart. We made it. David Whitmore remained seated beside her, his expression unreadable as he powered down his laptop. He had barely spoken since their earlier conversation, and Anna couldn't decide if she was relieved or uneasy about that. Something about the way he had studied her on the flight, that flicker of recognition in his gaze, it made her uneasy. The flight attendant returned with a warm smile directed at David. Mr. Whitmore, your driver is waiting outside? Would you like any assistance with your bags? Anna instinctively stiffened. Of course, he has a driver. David shook his head. I've got it, thank you. Then, almost as an afterthought, he glanced at Anna. Do you and Lily have a ride? Anna hesitated. She had planned to call Kate once they landed, but her sister's last text had been vague. Something about being tied up with a last-minute work emergency. The uncertainty made her stomach tighten. I'll figure it out, she said quickly, not wanting to give him any reason to offer help she wasn't ready to accept. David studied her for a beat longer than necessary, then gave a small nod. Suit yourself. As they joined the slow-moving line of passengers filing off the plane, Anna kept her head down, focusing on getting Lily through the terminal. But the moment they stepped past security and into the arrivals area, her phone buzzed. Kate. Bad news. My apartment building had a major pipe burst last night. They're evacuating the entire floor for repairs. I'm in a hotel. No idea when I'll get back in. Anna's heart sank. She read the message twice, hoping she had misunderstood, but there was no way around it. The place they were supposed to be staying, the only safety net she had left, was suddenly gone. Lily tugged at her hand. "Mommy, where are we going now?" Anna swallowed hard, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Give me a second, sweetheart." She had no backup plan, no money for a hotel, no family in LA except for Kate, who was now just as displaced as they were. Her pulse quickened as she tried to think, but before she could come up with a solution, she felt a presence beside her. David. He had stopped a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, watching her with quiet observance. "Problem?" he asked, his voice as even as ever. Anna hesitated for only a moment before shaking her head. "It's nothing I can't handle." David arched an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "That's so." She nodded firmly, but the truth settled heavy in her chest. She wasn't sure she could handle this at all. David didn't look away. His piercing blue eyes held steady, and for a brief moment, Anna felt exposed. Like he could see through every forced breath, every ounce of control she was trying to maintain. She hated that. Lily, oblivious to the tension, tugged at Anna's sleeve. "Mommy, I'm hungry." Anna forced herself to focus. Panicking wouldn't solve anything. She needed to figure this out, quickly. She opened her phone's Maps app, searching for cheap motels in the area. The options were disheartening. Even the lowest-rated motels required more money than she had at the moment. David shifted beside her. "I take it your ride fell through." Anna's jaw tightened. "It's just a temporary setback." David let out a quiet breath. "Look, I'm not trying to pry, but it's obvious you're in a tough spot. My offer still stands." Anna's head snapped up. "What offer?" David crossed his arms. "I have a guest house. It's separate from my place, fully furnished and empty. You and Lily can stay there until you figure things out." Anna stared at him. The words were simple, spoken without hesitation, but they carried an undeniable weight. She shook her head instinctively. "I can't do that." "Why not?" "Because," she exhaled, struggling to put into words what she was feeling. "Because it's too much. Because I don't know you." David tilted his head slightly. "You know enough, and I'm not asking for anything in return." Anna hesitated. She wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him she'd find another way, that she didn't need anyone's help. But Lily's small fingers gripped hers, and when she looked down at her daughter's tired face, reality settled in. She had no good options, and for some reason, her gut wasn't warning her against David Whitmore. Anna took a steadying breath. "Just for a few days." David nodded once, as if he had already known that would be her answer. "I'll have my driver bring the car around." Before she could change her mind, he turned and made a call, his voice low and controlled. Anna ran a hand through her hair, her heart pounding. She had no idea if she was making the right choice. But at this moment, it was the only one she had. As David ended the call and turned back to her, she squared her shoulders and met his gaze head-on. No matter what happened next, she wasn't going to let herself be another person who needed saving. She was going to figure this out on her own terms. And she had a feeling this was just the beginning. The ride to David's estate was silent, save for the occasional rustle of Lily shifting in her seat. She had fallen asleep almost instantly after being buckled in, her small body slumped against Anna's side. Anna gently stroked her daughter's hair, her mind racing as the city lights of Los Angeles blurred past the car windows. She had agreed to this. A few days, nothing more. Just until she could figure out another plan. But sitting in the back of a luxury vehicle, exhaustion threatening to consume her. The weight of her decision pressed down on her. David sat on the opposite side, relaxed but observant. He didn't push conversation, didn't try to convince her further, which somehow made her more aware of his presence. The driver, Thomas, maneuvered effortlessly through the quiet, upscale neighborhood. When the car finally pulled up in front of an iron gate, Anna's breath caught slightly. Beyond it, nestled in the hills, was a home that looked like something out of a magazine. The architecture was modern yet warm, with large glass windows reflecting the soft glow of outdoor lighting. The surrounding landscape was pristine, perfectly manicured gardens, towering trees lining the driveway. This wasn't just a house. It was a statement. Anna swallowed hard. "This is where you live." David glanced at her, then at the house. "Technically, I live in the main house. You'll be staying in the guest house." As if on cue, Thomas pulled forward toward a smaller but still incredibly elegant home separate from the main estate. It had a private entrance, a stone pathway leading up to the front porch, and large bay windows that gave off a welcoming glow. "This is the guest house?" Anna asked skeptically. David smirked. "What were you expecting? A basement with a cot?" She exhaled sharply. "I don't know what I was expecting." Before she could argue further, David was already stepping out of the car, walking toward the trunk. Anna gently nudged Lily awake, whispering, "Come on, sweetheart. We're here." Lily blinked up at her, drowsy but compliant, as Anna helped her out of the car. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from the garden. David handed Anna her duffel bag, while Thomas set the rest of their things near the front door. "It's fully furnished," David said. "There's food in the kitchen, clean linens, and anything else you might need. If you have questions, you can call me." Anna hesitated before nodding. "Thank you," she said, her voice quieter than she intended. David simply nodded. "Good night, Anna." With that, he turned and walked back toward the main house, leaving her standing at the threshold of an unfamiliar place. She glanced down at Lily, who was rubbing her eyes. "Mommy?" Lily whispered. "Is this our new home?" Anna's chest tightened. "No, baby," she murmured, unlocking the door. "Just for a little while." But as she stepped inside, taking in the warmth and comfort of the space, a part of her wasn't entirely sure. Anna closed the door behind her, the quiet click echoing in the stillness of the guest house. She let out a slow breath, scanning the space in front of her. The living area was elegantly simple: earthy tones, a plush sofa, warm lighting, and a fireplace that cast a soft glow across the room. It felt inviting, not cold or ostentatious like she had expected. She dropped her duffel bag near the entryway and guided Lily toward the bedroom, her daughter barely keeping her eyes open. The room was just as comfortable as the rest of the house. A neatly made bed, soft white sheets, and a window overlooking the garden outside. Anna pulled back the blankets, helping Lily climb in. The little girl curled up instantly, hugging her stuffed bunny close. "This place